Welcome to all the school administrators, educators, teachers, anyone when you're dealing with students, faculty, staff, parents. One of the key factors of school success is to have positive school culture. I'm going to tell you how that positive school culture can change the game for your school year. Why is that important? Let's think about what's one of the biggest difference about having positive school culture. There's a quote I would like to share, which I really enjoy. It talks about what is the difference. There is a very little difference in people, but that little difference makes a big difference. That little difference is attitude. The big difference is whether is it positive or negative. And that is so important because the attitude that you have right now for you to join and participate in this video, it might have been like, I'm only doing this because someone told me or the staff told me or we had to listen to this. Or some of us might be like, look, I want to look at how to make my school better. Just that mindset of coming into just this video plays a big part. If you're like, okay, I want to listen, you might be like, I'm going to have some notes. I'm going to make sure I'm kind of looking at how this could relate to my school. So that attitude changes everything from when you walk into the school, the way you talk to someone of a tough situation or a positive situation with the parent, with the student, with the teacher. So as administrators or leaders or even as teachers, when that situation, something comes up, the way your mindset is going to change the game. And you realize that even in health, people say that all the time. Especially cancer patients, they tell you the way your mindset, if you have a positive mindset, you will do much better. And I'm saying this because I myself went through it. And the doctor said the mindset that you have coming into the chemo will change and help you dealing with this and how your body's going to react to it. So one of the biggest difference is attitude. So first and foremost, I want to thank all of you for coming into this video with hopefully the positive attitude of learning and trying to make sure you become better so your school becomes better, and that only expands to the whole school community. So I'll give you an idea. For some of you guys who are educators in the classroom, there's a quote that I wanted to share. It goes, I've come to a frightening conclusion. I am the decisive element in the classroom. It is my personal approach that creates the climate. It is my daily mood that makes the weather. As a school leader, I possess tremendous power to make my child's life miserable or joyous. I can be a tool of torture or an instrument of inspiration. I can humiliate or humor, hurt or heal. In all situations, it is my response that decided whether a crisis will be escalated or de-escalated, or a child humanized or dehumanized. If I think I can't, I'm defeated before I even start. Think about this quote. The way you deal with the child could be joyous or miserable. Administrator, the way you deal with your staff member could be joyous or miserable. The way you deal with your parent could be joyous or miserable. You could be a tool of torture or instrument of inspiration to the student, to the teacher, to the parents, to any of the stakeholders. At whichever area you are in education, there's always going to be someone underneath you. So the way you deal with them and the way they perceive your communication can affect them. The way you approach and the way your voice tone also changes. Just like right now when I read this quote, my voice has gone up and down, trying to stay in a positive way. Shows and kind of helps you also get an idea like what I'm trying to get at. So this is why it's so important to kind of keep this in mind. This was a quote by Dr. Hiam Janet from Between Teacher and Child. So I thought kind of gives you an idea of how even the mindset of you saying a positive attitude and how that affects you in your classroom or your school hallways or in your school offices and your school with all your school stakeholders. So why is that school culture important? What does research say? Gary Phillips from the Center for Improving School Culture gives a quote. Positive learning can only take place in a positive culture. A healthy school culture will affect more student and teacher success than any other reform or school improvement effort currently being employed. The healthy school culture will affect more student and teacher success than any other school improvement program and currently being and efforts that we make for the employees. Because if you could change that from the different programs, how we deal with situations, how we move forward, how do we change when we have crisis, how do we make sure when our kids are struggling academically to make it better, how we deal with their discipline, the way our demeanor and the culture and that what we want to bring into the school, and when they step into the school, will change that aspect of it. As leaders, there's a quote from Mrs. Irma Tyler Woods, where she says, "You can't lead where you won't go. Leaders must be perpetual learners to bring about change in others." If you want to bring change in others, then you have to change within yourself. You need to make sure and look at what makes you tick. What makes you stay positive? What things are that bother you? Learn from that. What's the strong habits and skills that you have and where areas you need to improve on? But that culture that you want to build has to first become within you, then your close team, your admin team, and that could trickle down to the staff, down to the students, down to the parents, and then even to all the stakeholders at the school. So making sure, and if you're at a board level, then that has to change and say, this is the way I want to have the culture, where there is autonomy for the principal, there's autonomy for the teachers, there is student-centered lessons and learning. So that aspect of leadership plays a big part. And the last thing I want to end with, just to kind of give you an idea of like, what's the difference from climate with culture? So contrasting climate with culture, right? Because we have, climate, a lot of times people say, positive climate. No, I want to have a positive culture, right? Culture means it's going to be there for some time. Climate could just be 1 or 2 days. I'll give you some examples. Climate is Monday versus Friday. Culture gives Monday permission to be miserable, right? So you might have one. If that culture is that every Monday, it's okay because it's Monday. You don't have to be that serious. You could be tired. You could do 50% of the work. That's not good. Or Friday's really not a school day, or because that's almost like anything. Well, I'm just going to show some videos in the last hour or two. No, if you give that okay and say, no, 8 to 4, we are working hard. Yes, maybe that last hour is there. But when they slowly have this, it's just the Monday. You could have a moment that you had a bad weekend. Sunday, something happened, you're not feeling well. That one gives Monday, that certain day, the opportunity to say, you know what, I'm gonna give a pass. But when you start making the habit that every day is like that, that's bad culture, right? Giving Monday permission to be miserable every Monday is bad culture. So you wanna make sure, climate could come in there, but culture is so important that because if it becomes a habit, we have a problem. So that is number one. Number 2 example, attitude or mood of the group, right? That is like when you have the class, right? And then you might say, hey, today something happened, devastating, something happened in the world. People are feeling sad. Something happened. The boys lost a big game. Girls basketball team lost a big game. Some of the kids are feeling kind of sad about the next day. That gives them that opportunity for that day. Okay, you know what? Their attitude's there. But then the thing becomes the personality of the group. When it becomes that, well, every time something happens, they're always mad, and we have to be consistently not being happy or frustrated if things don't go that long or way. The personality of the group is like, it's always the teacher's fault, it's the staff's fault, it's the parents' fault, it's the admin's fault, where they just have that becomes a personality that they always have an scapegoat. And then rather just having that climate that of that day, there might be the change of the mood. So it's so important to kind of keep that in mind. Number 3, provides a state of mind, right? A climate gives you a state of mind for that day. Culture provides a limited way of thinking. If that culture is that you only say there can't, I visited 50 to 100 schools throughout my life, or communities. Sometimes people I don't think that you can't change anything here, Mr. Quadri. I go for consulting. I don't know, it's just so ingrained, I don't think it could change. I'm like, yes, we know that it's ingrained in culture, but you have to make those adjustments. The school I was at had 7 principals in the first 14 years. There was ingrained that, guess what? You're not going to be able to change the school climate, the culture, because 7 principals have tried to do it for 14 years. If I came in and said, okay, you know what? I'm just going to buy into that culture and be like, everyone, I'm going to do this, but I know it's not going to work. But if I had bought in and said, well, you know what? It's a new year. And now I've been in the same place for 17 years, right? And a coach can't be like, you know what, the Cubs always lose. There's no possible way that they're ever going to win. But a guy named Joe Madden came to, well, we're going to change that habit. And they've been in the playoffs for a few years and they won the championship. There are certain teams that people say they're always going to be losers. It's just the way it is. And if you have that personality, you're never going to move forward. If the country or if a company says, well, I don't think we're ever going to make it. But you have to chip away, move. And then some people, when you get really good, if you don't think like, oh, I don't need to make change, or we're great at culture, because you have to reevaluate your culture, like BlackBerry, which everyone had that phone, 70% of the market, but felt that I don't have to change as new things come in, smartphone, I don't know what that is, we're gonna be good. And you don't change, and that culture is like, we're good, we're at this thing, and that also the culture of eliteness, that we don't need any improvements, could also be a downfall. So kind of keeping those things in mind and all those. Number 4, it's contrasting climate with culture. It's flexible, easy to change, right? So certain days, as I said, in climate, you might have a bad day, but it's able to change it. Culture, this is where it's based, takes many years to evolve, right? So it's flexible, easy to change if it's a climate, it's like a one day. So it's no doubt about it, climate's gonna change in your school every day. But culture becomes when it takes too many years. And that's why, as I gave you my personal example, so many years, so I said, okay, first year or two, let's move, kind of chip away. And that's why when you're going to a new school and you're trying to change climate culture, it's going to be a process, but you're slowly building and chipping away. It's not going to be one day like the magic wand and say everything changes. You'll see that in companies, you see that in sports teams, you see that in even in families when you're dealing with a child. If child has some bad habits and one day has anger issues, you can't just be like, I want you to stop being angry. Doesn't work. You're gonna have to make that and say, okay, this is where it's there. Even in a classroom, if a child has some behavior issues or academic struggles, we are going to give them the support, the resource of modification, and slowly, hopefully in a year or two, they're gonna catch up to the standards, right? There are always gonna be some outliers who can do it faster or even slower, but you have a goal, you work in your IEP teams and you work that out, that plays a big part. So that's the idea of climate change. Something's happened, oh, that kid, there's no possible way he could change. I'm like, no, there is one day he maybe had a bad day, next day comes where we are going to make that process happen, and it takes years, but you start the process. Contrasting climate with culture, again, based on perceptions, right? And this is like, something happens in that perception. But when you have a culture where they think it's based on values and beliefs, and if you have a strong based on values and beliefs, so when you have what they call the Nordstrom way, that the customer is always right. It's, I read an article about this, and it's amazing because it's a very expensive store. I don't really shop there. But they realize that when they say the customer's right, when they buy there, there's always make them feel special, there's anything you need, this and that, and they have an opportunity to always return the product. And they realize that plays a big part, that when they know that, hey, the values, the beliefs of that organization, the company, they have that. People have those mottos and say, hey, you know what? You're in good hands with Allstate, right? People start having, hey, this is who they are, what they believe in. And at school, you want to have what is your motto, and it's there. If it's building character and developing minds, or whatever that you are trying to develop, and then they have to buy into that vision, that the mission statement, whatever, and that tagline, and say, hey, we are going to jump onto that, and that's what's going to be, and that based on those values and beliefs that we have as a school, especially the positive ones, we are going to move forward. So that's something that you want, because you don't want every day like, today we're going to do this and that. So that climate's not good, right? That's when you want to make that culture into that culture of constantly doing it. Feel it when you are when you come in the door. People see that. Oh, why is everyone kind of quiet? Yeah, because something happened, on the news or whatever it is. There's certain things that happen, so people could see that. Culture is that it's so ingrained that no one sees it. Members cannot see it. People are there like, well, really, is it that way? Because people don't realize that if people are down and like, well, are you not seeing that everyone's not happy? Because everyone's just kind of feeling that way, and it's become so ingrained they're just used to it. So making sure that culture is positive, and when things are not right, people understand that, and then they know that, hey, we have an opportunity to fix it. Let's walk together, talk together, sit together to make those adjustments that happen. Again, another one that's the contrasting climate with culture. It's when you're not just trying to feel, when you come through the door, you're feeling it, and you see it's all around you with the culture, where you start seeing stuff. But when it becomes culture part, it's a part of us. And then when it becomes a part of us and that's who we are and that's the way, like in sports they call the Patriots way. Hey, when you come into this thing, even if you're a star, you are going to follow this. It's just a part of the routine that you will fall into, and it's so important to have that culture there, right? And then it's so important that in the climate with culture is when you have a climate, you want to make sure that in the climate, people might say the way we feel around here, right? So climate say this is the way we feel around here. Culture is like this is the way we do things around here. Right? As I kind of talked about the parents, this is how we do things, right? And if it's positive, this is what you want them to. If there were things that were negative the way they're doing things, then you need to change that habit. And that's where reevaluating, looking at it, seeing the goods and bads. And when you want to get a good idea of a culture, you want to interview not just the teachers, but the students, the staff, the custodians, the community members. That way it gives you a better idea. When I first came into the school, I said, let me find out from all different groups of people what they thought were strong things about the school, what were areas of improvements, what they were really frustrated with. Then it gave me an idea, like where is this culture of everyone? What are people feeling? How are people thinking? Are they happy with some parts of school? Are they not? Which cultural things we should keep? Which one should we not keep? Those conversations have to happen, right? In climate is that you're trying to make that first step to improvement, right? You're kind of making sure it happens. And in that culture aspect is that you want to change the people's mind, determines if improvement is possible. And a lot of times people's like, well, I don't think it could happen at this school. You have to make that things and say, well, you know what? We know it has to happen and it's going to. So slowly you're building those climates and you're making them into those culture, and that's something that has to be done. And then what we have to realize, for this to be positive positive culture has to be in your head. If you're the leader of the school, the principal, it's got to be there. It's got to trickle down to the APs. If you're the superintendent of the school, it's got to be in your head, the positive culture, how you want it to happen, how to implement it. If you're the teacher of the class, it's got to be in your head. Positive, and this is the way I'm going to change it. I know where my weaknesses are. I'm going to improve it because I know this will have to do. I got to make it better. I got my information, and that's how you move ahead. So at every aspect of your area, even if you're support staff, you are looking at, I need to make my kids who feel like, because they struggle, they're not the same as other kids, we're the slow kids. You got to change that culture. And that comes from you and saying, hey, positive, that when you're teaching them, that you're important. If you're teaching the non-honors class and the kids feel like, I'm not in the honors class and we might be the dumb kids. Kids make up things in their heads and you got to get that stuff out. So at every level, there's an area that you could change their culture, and it comes from you guys. So having the climate, yes, those are kind of things you could have, but when it becomes a culture of the school, it could be great, but if it's something that's already negative, it's going to be hard to change. So that's why you have to look through when you're going to school for a few days and you realize, did I just see something today was just for a day situation, or is this the culture of that school? And that's so important that hopefully through some of these examples, you'll get a better idea. Take care about school climate and culture, and we'll look out for some other videos about this. Thank you.